This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary Programme Signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary Programme Signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary Programme Signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary Programme Signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary Programme Signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary Programme Signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary Programme Signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary Programme Signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary Programme Signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary Programme Signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary Programme Signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary Programme Signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary Programme Signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary Programme Signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary Programme Signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary Programme Signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary Programme Signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary Programme Signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary Programme Signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary Programme Signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary Programme Signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary Programme Signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary Programme Signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary Programme Signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary Programme Signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary Programme Signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary Programme Signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary Programme Signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary Programme Signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary Programme Signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary Programme Signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary Programme Signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary Programme Signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary Programme Signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary Programme Signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary Programme Signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary Programme Signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary Programme Signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary Programme Signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary Programme Signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary Programme Signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary Programme Signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary Programme Signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary Programme Signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary Programme Signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary Programme Signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary Programme Signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary Programme Signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary Programme Signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary Programme Signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary Programme Signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary Programme Signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary Programme Signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary Programme Signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary Programme Signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary Programme Signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary Programme Signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary Programme Signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary Programme Signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary Programme Signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary Programme Signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary Programme Signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary Programme Signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary Programme Signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary Programme Signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary Programme Signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary Programme Signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary Programme Signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary Programme Signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary Programme Signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary Programme Signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary Programme Signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary Programme Signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary Programme Signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary Programme Signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary Programme Signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary Programme Signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary Programme Signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary Programme Signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary Programme Signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary Programme Signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary Programme Signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary Programme Signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary Programme Signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary Programme Signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary Programme Signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary Programme Signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary Programme Signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary Programme Signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary Programme Signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary Programme Signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary Programme Signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary Programme Signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary Programme Signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary Programme Signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary Programme Signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary Programme Signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary Programme Signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary Programme Signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary Programme Signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary Programme Signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary Programme Signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary Programme Signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary Programme Signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary Programme Signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary Programme Signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary Programme Signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary Programme Signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary Programme Sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary Programme Sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary Programme Sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary Programme Sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary Programme Sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary Programme Sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary Programme Sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary Programme Sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary Programme Sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary Programme Sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary Programme Sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary Programme Sound. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary Programme Sound.
Please take your seats. Members, I have received notice from the Minister of Justice that she wishes to make a statement. Before I call the Minister, I remind members here in the Chamber that in light of social distancing being observed by the parties, the Speaker's ruling that members must be in the Chamber to hear a statement if they wish to ask a question has been relaxed. Members participating remotely must make sure that their name is on the speaking list if they wish to be called. Members present in the Chamber must also do this by rising in their places, as well as notifying the Business Office or Speaker's table directly. I do remind members to be concise in asking their questions. This is not an opportunity for debate per se. A long introduction should not be entertained. I also remind members that in accordance with long-established procedures, points of order are not normally taken during the statement or the question period thereafter. And I call the Minister for Justice. Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. At the outset, in welcoming this review, I want to place on record my thanks to the Chief Inspector for her work. This report, like the recently published RQIA review of services for vulnerable people detained in Northern Ireland prisons, is a significant piece of work, and I would encourage members to read all of it. Indeed, I think that it's necessary to read the whole report to gain a full understanding of the challenges faced by the prison service and its staff as they seek to manage and to rehabilitate some of the most challenging and complex people in our society. It is right the prison service is scrutinised for the work it undertakes, and it is also right that we recognise the significant transformation that has taken place since 2011, when the service was described as demoralised, disengaged and dysfunctional. No one is saying that now. Indeed, successive inspection reports highlight the depth and scale of the transformation that has taken place and the progress that continues to be made. Mr Speaker, it's important to set out for the record why, in November 2020, I commissioned this particular review. The House will recall the concerns were raised with me about the operation of our current supervision units, known as CSUs, in the context of the minimum standards expected for the segregation of prisoners. The minimum standards required are outlined in Appendix 3 of the review, which has been published today. In response to those concerns, the Director-General and I reviewed the most recent inspection reports for each of our prisons, published for McGilligan in December 2017, Maghaberry in November 2018 and Hydebank Wood in June 2020. It is important to note that none of those reports indicated or in any way suggested that the expectations or minimum standards were not being met. It would have been understandable if, in the middle of an extremely challenging global pandemic for the prison service, we had simply relied on those reports and waited for the next one. However, this issue is of such importance that both the Director-General and I concluded that the more appropriate course of action was that Sejini be asked to undertake an immediate review. Mr Speaker, we now have the outcome of that review, and I want to turn to what it tells us. It clearly recognises the commitment and hard work of prison staff and their healthcare partners working in these units. It tells us that significant improvements have been made in each of our current supervision units in recent years, a fact underpinned in each of the 3 prison inspection reports I have just referenced. However, it tells us we are failing in a small number of key areas. In focusing on those key areas, I want to reassure members that the Director-General and I not only accept the recommendations in the review, but have already implemented some of them and are currently implementing others. Before I set out that work on our future implementation plans, it's important we all understand why we have CSUs, who we accommodate in them, and the context in which they operate. CSUs are necessary because at times some prisoners cannot be managed safely elsewhere in the prison estate. Those in our CSUs fall broadly into 3 categories: those who are dangerous because they have assaulted staff or other prisoners, those who we believe are seeking to traffic drugs or other contraband, and those whose behaviours are so extreme that they have to be separated from other prisoners. By their very nature, our prisons contain some dangerous individuals who have harmed others in the community, and they seek to harm others, including our staff, within the prison. We have a duty to keep both our staff and those in our care safe. Mr Speaker, our prisons have been assessed by inspectors as safe. That is at least in part because we have CSUs. Much of the progress which has been possible in making prisons safer relies on the careful use of CSUs as areas where individuals who, because of their violent actions, need to be accommodated safely before attempts are made to reintegrate them back into the general population. Prisons also contain drug dealers and traffickers who seek to profit from the misery of others. They will use any means they can to get drugs and other illicit items into our prisons and care little about the harm they do to their peers. Successive inspection reports have highlighted the need for the prison service to take action to stop drugs entering our prisons, and the use of CSUs has rightly been a central and successful element of the strategy deployed. No one who understands the challenges of operating prisons would suggest that CSUs are not essential, but what this review highlights is that we must do better in administering them. Mr Speaker, in looking at those exhibiting extreme behaviours, it is important to remember that those in our prisons with mental health and severe behavioural issues didn't develop those at the gates of the prison. The reality is, and it is important that we all acknowledge it, that the prison service is often left to deal with those who have been failed by the system in terms of education, employment, housing and healthcare, often multiple times. 32% of those coming into our prisons have mental health issues. In real terms, that means that just over 500 of those individuals are in our care today. Strategic Recommendation 2 deals with one such group, prisoners suffering from severe mental disorders. I have consistently argued that those prisoners with severe mental health issues, albeit that they are small in number, should have equal access to current treatment in a secure inpatient mental health or learning disability hospital. But until they do, or for those who may not fully meet what is a high threshold for admission, the prison service is required to accommodate them and try to pick up the pieces. It is clear from this report that such individuals cannot always be accommodated within the general population, and that for many prisons across the UK which do not have inpatient facilities, care and supervision units are the only alternative available. I take little comfort from the fact that the average waiting time for prisoners to transfer to an outside facility under a transfer direction order is significantly shorter in Northern Ireland than it is in England and Wales. Such individuals should be accommodated in a closed hospital environment, suitably equipped and staffed, and we must ensure that happens more quickly and efficiently. Let me be very clear, whilst the prison service will work with health colleagues to implement the Chief Inspector's recommendation, the creation of the equivalent of a Broadmoor facility for a population as small as Northern Ireland is not sustainable, and so this is not an issue the Prison Service or the Department of Justice can resolve. Therefore, I have written to the Health Minister to ask him to prioritise the provision of agreed pathways for timely access to appropriate secure hospital beds for those with a clinical requirement, including on a long-term basis or when experiencing a mental health crisis in a prison setting. Mr Speaker, I want to assure members that we have no one in our CSU today awaiting transfer to an outside mental health facility, and I have asked the Director-General to ensure with immediate effect, rather than the 6 months recommended in this review, that health colleagues are able to undertake mental health and primary health care assessments of all prisoners immediately following their placement in our CSUs. The achievement of that goal will inevitably depend on the availability of the appropriate health professionals. Another theme of this review is the area of governance and the importance of having a vision, strategy and action plan for the effective operation of CSUs. We're committed to deliver the recommendation made within the timescale set, but in many ways putting a strategy in place, challenging as that will be, is the easy part. Implementing the strategy will have resource implications, and that will be difficult for the prison service to manage at a time when its budget is likely to be significantly reduced. Prison service has had oversight mechanisms in place for our CSUs for many years. Indeed, the Sagini HMIP Magabry inspection report of 2018 highlighted as good practice the monthly oversight meeting, which, and I quote, ensured that segregated prisoners were reviewed in depth by appropriate departments and the right support offered to meet their individual needs, end quote. However, this report has highlighted the need for change, and we are taking this forward as a matter of urgency. As the report highlights, there is a desire and willingness within the prison service to make positive change. The improvements in the accommodation at Hydebank and McGilligan is evidenced in the report, but we do face constraints. While we will take remedial action at Magabry, as set out in the recommendation, we are constrained in what can be done unless significant capital funding is provided. I've asked the Director-General to urgently assess what action is needed and will be engaging with the Department of Finance in due course. Mr Speaker, if I may now turn to the important issue of prisoner engagement, as highlighted in this report. The Chief Inspector has indicated that without appropriate evidence, it is not possible to provide satisfactory assurance to me, to prisoners and their families, this Assembly, or the wider community that some prisoners in our CSU experienced a regime that met the required minimum standards. On this basis, she therefore concludes that some prisoners had experienced conditions amounting to solitary confinement. Whilst no one is going without human contact or health care, what this report highlights is that the level of engagement is not considered to be sufficient. Time out of cells was not meeting minimum standards, and the records Prison Service has been keeping on engagement, efforts to engage unwilling prisoners and time out of cells is insufficient. Both the Director-General and I take the concerns raised very seriously, and on receipt of the draft report for factual accuracy checking on the 14th of October 2021, we immediately, within 3 days, took the following actions to begin to address this serious issue. The Governor of each prison establishment personally oversaw a review of each individual who was being held in the CSU at that time. A new regime was introduced for the CSUs at all 3 prison establishments, with a minimum of 2 hours' time out of cell offered to all prisoners held in these locations. Reinforced local government arrangements were implemented to ensure that all of the work staff do and interaction staff have with people in the CSU are fully recorded. No one should be under any illusion that the levels of engagement required by this review are and will remain resource intensive. We must also be mindful that many prisoners in CSU refuse to engage. Indeed, the review itself highlights that there are those in our CSUs who actively resist opportunities to engage and opportunities to reintegrate them into the general population. However, and notwithstanding the extreme staffing pressures we were facing as a result of COVID during the period of this review, and indeed are still facing, significant change has been implemented to ensure appropriate levels of engagement, purposeful activity opportunities and out-of-cell time are being provided for those willing to avail of them, and that they are being actively encouraged to do so. Mr Speaker, the comments in this report in relation to solitary confinement were, as the Chief Inspector has indicated, a difficult read for me and for the prison service, not least because they come at a time when many prison services across the world are, because of COVID, locking prisoners in their cells for up to 23 hours a day, often in crowded and cramped conditions. We have not taken that approach, and I have previously set out for members the work we have done to try to maintain family contact, free association and purposeful activity for all those in our care. It is therefore regrettable and disturbing that some of the small number of prisoners in our CSUs experience such isolation. Whilst prisoners in CSUs currently represent just 1% of the prisoner population across our 3 prisons, that does not lessen the seriousness of the issue or our absolute commitment to address their needs and their particular vulnerabilities. Mr Speaker, if I can turn to the issue highlighted in relation to women in our care. Some members may recall that the prison service was consistently criticised when the female CSU was in Ash House, the main female accommodation block at Hyde Bank. A new CSU was created and we moved our female CSU to that building in early 2020. Women and men were accommodated in the same building but on separate landings. This decision significantly improved the experience for the women in Ash House, who no longer had to endure the disruption highlighted in numerous previous inspection reports and was implemented without the need for additional resources. The new CSU facility, as the Chief Inspector acknowledges, was of a much better standard. But she concluded that having male and female prisoners in a shared facility or building contravened the Mandela rules. As a result, we immediately, on receipt of the draft review, moved the CSU back to Ash House on the 17th of October 2021. A new CSU facility, which will have to be resourced from within our current allocation, will open shortly for the small number of women who have to be accommodated there. Mr Speaker, this report and its findings have significance for the operation of care and supervision units beyond Northern Ireland. I do not believe that such an in-depth review has previously been carried out anywhere across these islands, and I have asked the Director-General to ensure the recommendations are shared with our sister services. I have asked the Director-General to continue to provide me with regular updates over the coming weeks as he chairs the steering group to implement the remaining recommendations in this report, all of which I have accepted. I have also asked the Director-General to ensure the Justice Committee is given regular updates detailing the progress that has been made. Mr Speaker, like every organisation, much is expected from prison service, and rightly so. This is not something the service shies away from. In fact, Mr Speaker, quite the opposite. Neither will the service shy away from apologising when they fail to provide the level of service we have come to expect from them. Therefore, Mr Speaker, I have no hesitation in apologising to those prisoners who did not receive the level of engagement this report identifies as the minimum standard expected. In reading this entire report and the numerous others published in recent years, members will see that prison service has a willingness to learn and a determination to drive continuous improvement. This report sets out some significant challenges. However, in delivering the recommendations in this report, the prison service will be better, as will be the experiences of those committed to our care. Thank you.
And thank the Minister. I want to call the Chairperson of the Committee for Justice, Mervyn Story.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and can I thank the Minister and the Director-General for the time that they took this morning to discuss the report and the reassurances that were given. Also to thank the Chief Inspector for the time that she took yesterday to brief ourselves in regards to the report. And I welcome the comments in the Minister's statement recognising the significant transformation that has taken place in our prisons since 2011. I want to place on record our thanks and appreciation to the prison staff who continue to do an extremely difficult and challenging occupation on a day and daily basis. Can I ask the Minister to set out why the Northern Ireland Prison Service didn't have a strategy or policy in place for the operation of the CSUs to ensure the minimum standards were met and records were maintained across the system, and also, and I think as important, to provide the staff who are undertaking this very difficult and challenging work with the support and the guidance that they are entitled to receive when carrying out these particular jobs.
Well, I thank the Chair of the Committee both for his question and also for his reflective remarks in terms of the work that has been done by prison officers in what are incredibly complex cases. The issue in the report, as identified by the Inspector, was more in line that we did not have an overall strategy prison-wide in terms of the CSUs that met the requirements that she would have set. However, there is, of course, a strategy in terms of how we operate the CSUs, and I have alluded, for example, to the 3 categories of prisoners that would be placed in CSU, to the facilities that are available to each prisoner within CSU, which is standardised across all 3 facilities. And the issue of record keeping is one that I witnessed myself when I visited the CSU and spoke with officers. It is a difficult and dynamic environment, and there is a balance, I think, to be struck between the amount of time spent keeping records and the amount of time spent in actual prisoner engagement and support. And so I think that there will be challenges going forward in terms of the level of intensification of record keeping that is required. But it is important, given that the Inspector has said that we need to keep better records of that engagement, that we act to do that, and action is already being taken to support prison officers in that regard. In terms of the support for prison officers, the member will be fully aware of the work that I have done as Justice Minister in terms of providing better support both for former and current prison officers, and that will continue to be rolled out over the coming months. But particularly for those in CSU who are often dealing with people exhibiting extreme behaviours, including violent behaviours, it is a challenging environment. In order to ensure that we are able to have the right support in place, we have redeployed people from other parts of the service to increase the numbers of people working in the CSUs, which we believe will both facilitate the enhanced prisoner engagement but also the enhanced record keeping that has been requested. On the issue of resources, of course, the member will be more aware than most of the particular challenges we face in prison service going forward. The current budget, as proposed, would see a reduction in the facilities that we were able to offer and in the number of prison officers who would be there to provide it. And so we do need to look very carefully as we look at the draft budget as to the likely impact that would have in terms of our ability to deliver as we would wish to do and as the Inspector has indicated we ought to.
Report into the use of CSUs, you did not accept that the use of these units constituted solitary confinement. The report makes it very clear that for many prisoners that is exactly what it was. The UN regard a period of 15 or more days in solitary confinement as a form of psychological torture. So, Minister, how many prisoners have spent over 15 days in solitary confinement in these units, and would you describe that as torture?
Well, the first thing to say is that my confidence that we were not contravening the rules was based on previous CJINI reports, 3 of them, which said that we were not and raised no red flag in respect of how the CSUs were operated. It's also the case that the CJINI report, that not just the CJINI report, but also, for example, the International Red Cross had visited the CSUs and the prisons and had raised no red flag in that regard. Contrary to what the member has said, it does not say that many prisoners faced solitary confinement, but it said that some prisoners may have faced conditions amounting to solitary confinement. I certainly don't dismiss that in the case of those prisoners who did, but there was also no evidence to suggest that any prisoner was submitted to such conditions for periods in excess of 15 days or close to 15 days. These were intermittent lapses. There is no evidence that people were essentially being locked in their cell without contact. I think it's also important that we look at what solitary confinement means in the context of a prison in Northern Ireland. Every prisoner, even during this period, was offered time out of cell. Every prisoner was offered access to showers, to telephones, had radio or television in their cell, and was spoken to by prison officers as they delivered their meals on a daily basis. Some refused that contact, and we now need to look at how we can better engage with prisoners who do refuse contact. But I think we need to look at that in the context of what is available to those prisoners, even where our standards have fallen below those which we would have required. But we are not content with that. And the reason I commissioned this report was to ensure that we were meeting minimum standards. And the purpose of the report is to set out what those standards are. It has done so with more clarity than has been available previously. And my job now is to make sure that we meet those standards going forward.
And can we now bring the member Sinead Bradley on screen, please?
Mr. Speaker, thank you, Minister, for your statement so far. Minister, as Chair of the APG on preventing loneliness, it really does pain me to read this report and the crippling effect of loneliness can have on any of us. It has the ability to break us. Minister, my question relates to the report's case review of a male prisoner aged 20 years who had a total period of segregation in the CSU and COVID-19 isolation of 116 days. I recognise your apology today, but I do think in your previous answer you pedalled back somewhat on that, because the length of time is, in my mind, inhumane and torturous. And I would also argue, Minister, that those people who are not engaging may be those who are not receiving the medical care that they need, because we're also aware that there are people in CSUs who have undiagnosed personality disorders. Does the Minister anticipate that a maximum period of isolation will be adhered to, and that safe methods of interaction with other humans while in CSUs will be utilised? And can the Minister also tell me, if full mental health screening is introduced, as it should be, will there be a minimum number of days where TDRs must be exercised, and that person in care will be transferred to a clinical setting?
Well, there are a number of parts to the member's question, but to be clear, Mr. Speaker, at no stage have I wrote back from my apology to those who were held in those conditions which did not meet the minimum standards. But I do believe that it is important that we place that in context and that we do not exaggerate the extent of the problem, that we base it on the report itself and not conjecture that extends beyond the report, because facts matter in these cases. In respect of those who have been held for prolonged periods of time in isolation on committal to prison, of course that is of concern. But I think the member will also acknowledge that it is because of that isolation that we have introduced as a result of COVID, that we have been able to ensure that there have been no major outbreaks of COVID within the prison system. And if we contrast that, for example, to some of the outbreaks that we have seen in other comparable residential environments, I think that decision was warranted, albeit not one that we wish to take. In terms of CSUs, there are a small number of people who don't meet the threshold for a mental health order assessed by mental health practitioners. They cannot move out of the prison because they have been sentenced by the court, and yet they can be some of the most challenging people that we have to deal with. Their behaviours, however, mean there is nowhere else for them to be accommodated. We have one particular individual who has been in the CSU for some time due to his continued extreme behaviour. He has been the subject of ongoing multidisciplinary serious case reviews through prisoner safety and support, and including our health partners. He continues to threaten staff on a daily basis, threaten nurses who engage with him, and on a daily basis he has moved cells, yet often refuses to shower. He spreads his own faeces on the cell door and walls, and when challenged is verbally threatening and threatens the use of violence. His behaviour means he cannot be located within the general population, and he has been assessed as not meeting the threshold for a transfer direction order. He falls through the gaps, and that gap, as often is the case, is a prison, and we pick up the pieces that no one else wants to deal with. So I have written to the Health Minister, as I stated in my statement earlier, in order to look to see whether there are options, short of a closed mental health facility within prisons, that would allow secure accommodation to be provided for those individuals. But it has to be recognised that many of those individuals, even with a full diagnosis, will not meet the threshold for a transfer direction order, and that is not within the gift of prison. That is a health assessment that has to be made. It is important, of course, that we guard against loneliness. It is why, for example, we continue to maintain landing-based regime throughout the prison in order that people would be able to have free association even during COVID. It is why, for example, we allowed people that extra time with family via virtual calls and additional phone contact. That, however, in terms of additional phone contact, is available to those within CSUs at all times. So it has to be also considered, Mr. Speaker, not everyone in CSU has a mental health disorder. It's important to recognise that. At the moment there are 14 people in our CSUs. 9 are there for violent conduct, 4 for suspected drug trafficking, and 1 for extreme behavioural issues. No one is currently awaiting a mental direction order.
Speaker, and I thank the Minister for her statement, and I welcome the report. I think it's an important piece of work, and it's a challenging report, and I absolutely get what the Minister was saying about people held in CSU. One guy, according to the report, has been in there for 366 days, and I think that might be the individual that the Minister was referring to. But I suppose my concern and question to the Minister is based on her statement, where she quite clearly says engagement required by this review are and will remain resource intensive. And I've raised this issue many times, Minister, and that is about staffing levels. I honestly believe we have a real concern about staffing levels of our prison service. Can the Minister outline how we can try and increase those staffing levels to deal with this issue of this report?
Well, at the moment, and I thank the member for his continued interest in this, at the moment staff have been redeployed from other parts of the prison in order to enhance the staffing cover in CSU. The member will be aware from his time in the Justice Committee that, of course, we routinely recruit new staff to deal with people who pass out of the prison service over periods of time. But there is no realistic opportunity for us to significantly increase the overall number of prison staff available, particularly in light of the budget cuts which are coming down the tracks if we proceed along the lines of the draft budget. In fact, we would be looking at a reduction in the numbers of staff. Staff have been put under pressure during the COVID period. One of the things that we tried to do was remove doubling up from the prisons, so that each prisoner would have their own cell. That meant us opening up new landings. It meant us opening up new areas of the prison, and that required additional staffing in order to ensure that that was safely done. We also, as you'll appreciate, had to deal with incoming prisoners who were going into COVID isolation units, and that again put staff under pressure. And like the rest of the population, the staff in our prisons have been affected by COVID, and so we have had to be constantly monitoring the rates of people who have been absent either in long-term sick leave or with COVID-related isolation and illness. It has been a difficult period for prison service, as I have recounted on many occasions as we have come before the Assembly to answer questions. However, we do not use COVID to in any way excuse what has been found by the Inspector's report. Many of these issues are issues that I believe need to be resolved anyway, irrespective of COVID. But in terms of making any promises with respect to increased numbers, all of that will be entirely dependent on budget outcomes. And so we need to be realistic about what we're able to achieve, given the constricted resources within which we have to operate.
Stuart Dixon.
Mr Speaker, and thank you, Minister. Minister, can I commend you for not only commissioning this report, but for the very swift action that you and prison staff have taken to alleviate the issues that have been set out in the report. Minister, could you set out for the House today some of the opportunities that are available for those who are held in CSU and what activity and time out of cell is available to them?
Well, first of all, can I thank my colleague for his remarks, and it is important that we take this report seriously. I commissioned this report specifically because I wanted not just to reassure myself, but to reassure those in our prisons and their families, and indeed those in this House, that we were meeting minimum standards. And where we have fallen short of those minimum standards, it is right that we should apologise, but more than that, it is right that we should take immediate and swift action to address those issues. In terms of what is available for prisoners, all prisoners held in CSU have access to phone calls, showers, yard time, virtual visits, ordinary visits subject to COVID-19 pandemic restrictions, and learning activity. Depending on why the person is in CSU, where their behaviour permits, they have a radio or television in their cell. Not all prisoners choose to engage or take up activities, out of cell time or input from others, and NIPS has not routinely recorded those refusals. The development of the new IT solution will enable NIPS to provide better data in order to evidence that time out of cell, meaningful contact and, where appropriate, refusals have taken place. And it is important that we record all of those things, because I think that that will then provide us and indeed the prison service with the reassurance we need that we are meeting the minimum standards and that we are doing all within our power to do so.
Nicole Dolan.
Justice is required by prison rules to review and provide an agreement for application to extend a prisoner's segregation in a CSU beyond 72 hours. However, this report demonstrates that in practice the prison service approved the applications without monitoring or oversight. Would you accept that essentially this allowed the prison service, which clearly wasn't meeting the required standards, to mark their own homework? How has this been allowed to go unchecked for so long?
Well, with respect, that is not what this particular report finds. It does, of course, raise the issue as to whether adequate record keeping had been kept in a format that satisfied the inspector, and we've accepted that it needs to be improved. So the administration certainly needs to be improved. But you have to look at this in the context of previous reports. For example, the McGabry 2018 report said that staff managed prisoners confidently and were aware of the individual needs of men in their care. Prisoners we spoke to were complimentary about staff and appreciated the help they received. The regime for men staying longer for a longer period in the unit was good, as it reflected plans to reintegrate them into the general population. Segregation staff were dedicated and professional. So whilst we realise that there are shortfalls in terms of the record keeping, I think it would be unfair to suggest that when those reviews take place they are less than adequate, because there is no finding either in this report or the 2018 report that that is the case.
Call Peter Weir.
For her statement today, and I think it is important to place on record that despite the problems that have been highlighted by the report, it's important to place on record the good work that is happening amongst prison, within the prison service, and indeed the hard work of the prison office staff. Can I ask the Minister, everyone in this House I think will want to see the full adoption of the report, which is what she has indicated, and the support given to the prison staff on the ground. But as she's highlighted, the key challenge will not be so much strategy as implementation. Can I ask the Minister what assessment has been done of the necessary resources that will be required to ensure full implementation of the report, and whether that is something achievable without additional financial support to the Department beyond what has been currently on offer in terms of the budgetary settlement?
Well, first of all, the Director-General of Prisons has set up an implementation group and is working with them to identify the recommendations and how they will be implemented. That work is ongoing. As I said in my statement, in terms of capital expenditure, I have asked the Director-General to review particularly the CSU at McGabry and the exercise yard there in terms of what improvements may be necessary, how that could be reconfigured and improved in the interim, and also what long-term propositions might be brought forward and the resource that will require. When we have that assessment, we will then engage with the Department of Finance in terms of additional resources, because that is not a piece of work, unlike, for example, the improvement of the CSU at Hydebank, which we would be able to resource from within our own resources within the Department of Justice. In terms of the facilities for mental health and for those small cohort of prisoners who have serious mental health issues, I have written to the Health Minister to discuss with him in more detail how that can be better managed within, if you like, the civilian mental health service outside prisons, and whether or not dedicated pathways and indeed dedicated secure facilities can be provided for those suffering mental health crisis whilst in prison, because I think that that would go some way to meeting our requirements, but that will of course have implications both for our resources and for those of the health service. And I suppose the other resource implications are those which I've already described in response to Doug Beattie's question, and that is the issue of human resources, because at the end of the day, the security of our prisons, the safety of our prisoners and the safety of our staff is entirely reliant on human resources and the degree to which we can deploy those appropriately. And so it is a continual challenge to meet that with a growing prison population, with a growing remand prison population. And so we do need to look very carefully at the impact of any forthcoming cuts in terms of prison service and the impact that that would have on the safety of our prisons more generally, but also in the quality of the rehabilitative effort the prison staff can make as part of their daily duties. Because remember, it is not simply a matter of locking prisoners away, it is a matter of working with them, whether in CSU to reintegrate them into the general prison population or in the general population to ultimately reintegrate them into society.
I call Liz Kimmins.
And I thank the Minister for answers so far. Minister, this is not a one-off report, and following the RKIA report into healthcare for vulnerable people in prisons last October, this report identifies a number of failings of planning and delivering basic and specialist healthcare. So, Minister, would you accept that immediate action is needed cross-departmentally between Justice and Health and between the South Eastern Trust and the Prison Service to address these issues urgently?
With respect to the RQI report, most of the recommendations in that case fall to health because, as you will recognise, in order to ensure that prisoners' privacy is protected, the information that the healthcare teams would have would not be routinely shared with prison service. However, we indicated at that time that we would work with our colleagues in the Department of Health to try to provide better standards. I'm on record as saying that I am concerned that there are people in our prisons who would be better dealt with through mental health alternatives. It's one of the reasons, for example, why we are developing problem-solving justice to deal with those who may, for example, have addiction problems, who may have substance abuse issues, and indeed may have mental health issues in order to avoid incarceration in the first place. However, it's not as simple as saying that this is a series of reports that is condemning the same issue. Not everyone in our CSUs have mental health issues. Many people who have mental health issues are housed within the general population of the prison and managed well there, and that is, I think, a tribute to the care that they provide from the South Eastern Trust and also from Prison Service. This is a dedicated and small number, but very vulnerable number of people who have extreme behaviours, and as I have said, it often confuses me, frankly, how such individuals do not qualify for transfer direction orders, but the assessment is a medical one, not a prison service one, and their prisons, the medical assessment is that they don't meet those thresholds, yet they are clearly people who could not be easily accommodated within the general population. Why we try to manage that, and also violent conduct and drug trafficking in CSUs, we need to make sure that those minimum standards are met. I am absolutely committed to doing so. With respect to the speed with which we do it, I have already indicated that a number of the recommendations have already been implemented and were implemented immediately on receipt of the draft report, so before it was finalised. I've already written to the Health Minister to ask to engage with him about the mental health and the more complex issues, and we will continue to maintain that engagement because it is absolutely vital that people who are committed to our care in the prison service are able to access the same level of health care and the same level of treatment and support as anyone else in the community. And it is important that we work together as departments to try and ensure that that is delivered in a timely and an appropriate way.
I call Palm Cameron.
I thank the Minister for Justice for her statement to the House today. I wonder, could she give us just some more clarity around paragraph 2.10 of the report in around the fitness for adjudication and the South Eastern Health and Social Care Trust that the staff would no longer fit prisoners for adjudication. Could you give us some more clarity around that issue, please?
Yes, and I thank the member for her question. As you will appreciate, it was the South Eastern Health and Social Care Trust who made it clear that they would no longer fit prisoners for adjudication. The reasons for this are simple, that for them to do so would actually breach the Mandela rules themselves, and therefore when that was apparent, that no longer happens. The inspector's report had suggested that that may be something that needed to be considered in the future, but unfortunately it is not possible for us to do what was suggested as a remedial action from the inspector on that occasion, because the South Eastern Health and Social Care Trust were clear that they were not willing to share that kind of personal information about prisoners with prison service. So it is a complex area, but we could not go back to how things used to be, because that would itself have breached the Mandela rules.
Just McNulty.
Minister, you've just described very worrying human rights failures of the Department of Justice. You presented barriers to implementing the strategy in terms of resource implications. Can you tell me what conversations you've had with your southern counterpart, Minister McEntee, in relation to pooling resources, both infrastructural and in terms of personnel and expertise, to ensure the best outcomes for all prisoners on this island who may have mental health challenges?
I have had no conversations with Minister McEntee about the pooling of resources because it would not be appropriate given the different sentencing regimes in each jurisdiction and the different legal regimes in each jurisdiction to do so. There is a conversation, however, as I indicated earlier, to be had around the findings of this report and the clarity that it provides in terms of the operation of CSUs, which is, of course, an issue which exists in the South as well as right across these islands. And so I have directed the Director-General to have those conversations with his counterparts to ensure that they are aware of the standards set by this report in terms of meaningful contact and productive activity, that they are fully aware of how that is now being interpreted in terms of how it should be recorded, because I think this will require change right across these islands. And so, as always, we would pass on what we believe is evidence of good practice, but also recommendations that indicate how practice can be improved, so that we share that with our counterparts and are able, on that basis, to improve conditions for prisoners right across these islands.
Robbie Butler.
Minister for her response to what is a very challenging situation and the report. And the Minister has rightly recognised the difficulty it is for staff working in prisons, especially in areas like the CSU, which formerly was called the PSU. And the Minister has also recognised, on my leader's question about staff retention and turnover, staff will be the answer, but it will not just be numbers, Minister. Is there any work being done to ensure that the staff who work in the CSU, which is a more challenging environment in an already hostile environment, will be trained appropriately to meet the needs, and that also perhaps that there is a rotation of staff who work in those areas who will be impacted by the challenging people that they work with sometimes?
Well, on the latter part, there is a rotation of officers. They do serve a time in CSU, but they can rotate out of that. And obviously, having met with the officers who work in CSU, I found them personally to be incredibly motivated and very dedicated. They understood the complexities of the prisoners with whom they were working. And as I referenced in terms of previous inspection reports, that was reflected in the inspector's comments. The issue here, I think, has been about how time out of cell, how engagement to encourage people to leave their cells who don't wish to, how the conversations that are had when people are receiving their food and so on. That is not currently and has not been recorded. Things like prisoners refusing to take up time in the exercise yard has not previously been recorded. It's absolutely crucial that it is, because if we don't record it, then it's very hard to measure whether or not there is more we can do in any area in order to improve that engagement. And so we're already working on an IT solution that will allow that to be recorded. In terms of support for prison officers, you'll be aware obviously of the rollout both of physical and mental health support for prison officers. These are challenging environments, there is no question about that, and nowhere in the prison is more challenging than the CSU. As I said, as of today, 9 of the 14 prisoners in CSU are there because of violent behaviour. Those of you who may have been listening to the Director-General this morning will have heard that 3 prison officers were assaulted by a prisoner in CSU who they tried to encourage to leave their cell to take up time to be spent out in the yard. The prisoner emerged from the cell and attacked the 3 prison officers, so it is not without risk. And so we need to find ways of encouraging people to use that time, encouraging people to engage, but doing so in a way that does not escalate tension within the CSU or provoke reactions that could put our prison staff or indeed health staff in danger. And that is not an easy balance to strike. So I'm not being glib when I say it will be difficult and that it will be resource intensive. It will. As for training, all of our prison officers are trained in terms of how to deal with difficult people, because they don't arrive and stay in CSU. People arrive in the general population exhibiting some of these behaviours, and they're then transferred to CSU for closer management. But there is particular training, obviously, for those in CSU, because there are particular standards that need to be met, and that will become more acute given the fact that we're going to have particular recording mechanisms that will be required in CSU to ensure that we do not at any time in future fall below the minimum standards, as has happened during this inspection.
I call Aisling Riley.
Minister, Juan Mendes, the former UN commentator on torture, when speaking about the use of prolonged solitary confinement, said these practices trigger and exacerbate psychological suffering, in particular in inmates who have experienced previous trauma or have mental health conditions, and that the psychological and physical consequences are severe and often irreparable. Minister, and I note that you said that you have engaged with the Department and the Minister of Health, but is it appropriate for prisoners with severe mental health disorders to be in prisons in the first place, or should they be in healthcare settings?
I think I have already addressed that question, in that I believe that people primarily with mental health issues, where that is, for example, the cause of their offending, are better off dealt with not in a custodial setting at all. But sadly, we often find that people arrive in our prisons because of failures of the system, whether it be education, housing, health, or other parts of our system. They are in our prisons because they have offended, often seriously, despite their mental health issues. And we cannot simply ignore the fact that that we are tasked to house them and to rehabilitate them. Not all of them will meet the threshold for a transfer direction order to a mental health facility. And so we are left with people who are between 2 places. I think that they would be better served by secure mental health facilities in some cases, but they don't necessarily meet that threshold that is currently in place, which is why I want to meet with the Health Minister and discuss with him the importance of it. I do want to reassure members, and I don't make light of any period of solitary confinement, because I think that is something that we should be concerned about. Our minimum standards are designed to avoid that happening, and therefore where we have fallen short of those minimum standards, we will improve, and it is important that we do so. But there is no suggestion in this January report that people were being held for long periods of time in solitary confinement. There were people being held for long periods of time in CSU, and there is a good reason, as I've set out today, why some of those behaviours may never be able to be managed in the main prison population. There are also some who resist being reintegrated into the prison population for reasons of their own choice, because they would prefer to be in CSU and away from the main prison population, and that is a challenge which we have to step up and meet as well. But there is no suggestion that all of those who were in the prison for long periods of time were being held in solitary confinement, nor that CSU in and of itself amounts to solitary confinement. It was, I think, the case that the report states very clearly some prisoners were held in conditions that amounted to solitary confinement, but that would not have been the case at all times during their stay in the CSU, nor would it have been the case for prolonged periods, which is why it is so important that members read the entire report and use language very carefully when it comes to discussing what is a very serious issue, but one that we are addressing.
Call Christopher Stafford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Firstly, the Minister knows that for more than 50 years to be employed in the prison service in Northern Ireland has carried with it a much more significant risk than being employed in the prison service in other parts of the United Kingdom. And I think it's important to be placed on record our appreciation for the staff and the work that they're undertaking. The Minister has detailed some of the extremely difficult situations that the staff have been facing at their place of work. Could I guide the Minister to paragraph 4.65 of the report? And there's a line in that that says, The pandemic had forced some restrictions on wider engagement, but evidence from before COVID-19 restrictions strongly reinforced the fact that it was the environment and perceptions of the CSU at Maghaberry and its staff that were long-term hurdles to improving the quality and level of engagement with prisoners. Could I ask the Minister to speak to that particular line, and does she agree with me that will be extremely demoralising for the motivated and dedicated people working in the prison service to read today?
Well, I think, of course, it will be difficult in terms of prison service, and it is a difficult read for me as Minister, as it is for the Director-General. When we set standards, we set high standards in prison service, and as I said earlier, no one is referring to prison service in the terms that they were in 2010 and 2011. No one is referring to our prisons in the terms that they were during that period either. They are now regarded as safe, but our staff are regarded as motivated and capable and engaged with the work that they do. The comment that you refer to is not underpinned by evidence, and indeed elsewhere in the report the Chief Inspector praises staff when she says, and I quote, "During this review I met impressive and committed prison officers and healthcare staff in current supervision units who face complex challenges every day." I would not wish people to hang on one phrase any suggestion that the Inspector is being particularly critical of prison officers or suggesting that they are not willing to change. I think the history of the last 10 years has shown they are willing to change, they are willing to improve, and I think the future will show, in terms of the response to this report, that that continues to be the case in our prison service, and I would not accept anything less.
Call Andrew Muir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the Minister for her statement. I also declare at the outset that I was previously a member of the Independent Monitoring Board at Hydebank Wood a number of years ago, so I am conscious and aware of the extremely challenging circumstances that are being referenced here. I saw those at first hand, and some of those will remain with me for the rest of my life. Can I ask the Minister that you commissioned the report in November 2020, and it's only been published now, which is 14 months later. How has this affected your response to the findings of the report and the recommendations placed upon the Department?
Well, I thank the member for his question and also for his time as a member of the Independent Monitoring Board, and it's something that I would encourage other people to consider doing in terms of volunteering, because I think they play a hugely important role, an undervalued role in terms of oversight of what happens in prisons, and their ability to be able to engage with me directly and with the Director-General about concerns is crucial. I commissioned the review, as you know, on the 9th of November 2020. The fieldwork took place between February and May 2021. A draft report was received for factual accuracy by NIPS on the 14th of October, and the response was returned to Sejini on the 19th of November 2021. It was on the 14th of October that we first were made aware of the potential findings, and it was at that point that we then acted immediately on those findings to deal with the most serious failures that had been identified. The Chief Inspector wrote to me on the 4th of January to request permission to publish, and I was content for her to do so. However, 2 further letters were received on the 14th and 20th of January notifying changes to Strategic Recommendation 1 and 2 and Operational Recommendation 1 respectively. Both had been amended following consultation with the RQIA, and I responded the following day giving my approval to publish. The fieldwork that was undertaken did not raise any concerns with me or with the Director-General until we saw the draft report 8 months after the fieldwork and 5 months after the McGilligan inspection. As I mentioned in my statement, the Women's CSU was moved back to Ash House immediately, and we acted immediately to accept and implement the recommendations in the report. Given that the concerns raised in the report were not raised in the most recent prison reports, nor, as I understand it, are they raised in the McGilligan inspection, which was completed in May 2021 and will be published later this month, it's fair to say the findings in this report did take us by surprise, and it made a very uncomfortable reading. However, continuous improvement is what we are about in prisons, both for those in our care and for our staff. And I'm confident that by accepting the recommendations and implementing them as swiftly as we have, we will meet the high standards that Jenny quite rightly expect of us with respect to operation of our CSUs. And I look forward to continuing to work with the Chief Inspector to ensure that we do so.
I call Paula Bradshaw.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and thank you, Minister, for your statement this morning. The report touches on the appropriateness of housing men and women in close proximity to one another in a prison setting. Can you provide any more details on the progress for the new female facility at Hydebank? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. By way of context, in June 2021, Sajini and HMIP, in reporting on Ash House, noted there was no CSU for women. They were simply kept in their cell in Ash House. This arrangement had an adverse impact on the other women in Ash House, and so Prison Service put considerable effort into developing and implementing an architect-designed CSU within Hydebank Wood, which was initially used to house young men. We took the decision in October 2020 to move women who needed to be held in a CSU environment to the new facility. Women were held on a separate landing within CSU, and shared facilities were used by men and women at different times. However, on receipt of the draft report, Prison Service took the decision to relocate those women back to Ash House in October 2021. We have plans to open a refreshed CSU for women who need to be held there by February 2022. In terms of the new female facility, approval for the associated expenditure in the outline business case for the new facility on the Hydebank Wood site was granted by the Department of Finance on the 25th of May 2021. Prison Service is now progressing delivery of the outline business case 2. The OBC2 will provide detail of the full design and specification for the preferred option. It provides a basis for Department of Finance approval to initiate the formal procurement process. The OBC2 will be completed by this spring. A distinct new female facility will be designed with the purpose of creating a therapeutic building that assists rehabilitation based on the principle that female offenders in general have lower levels of risk but higher levels of vulnerability than adult males. In recognition of females being in relationship-driven, the existing Ash and beach accommodation will be reconfigured into an intimate, distinct village-like environment, including a gym, healthcare unit, independent living unit and accommodation, providing a total of 82 units, including 6 observation cells with in-cell sanitation facilities to accommodate 76 females. Delivery of the new facility is dependent on the provision of capital funding and will be considered as part of the process of setting the next budget.
And I call Rachel Woods.
Mr Speaker, and I thank the Minister for making the statement today, and also to Sajini for the review. The report is clearly not what was expected, and some parts are indeed distressing and disturbing to read. But in November 2020, we were told that the Minister was confident that the allegations of people being held in solitary confinement would be found to be inaccurate, and that she would not tolerate people being held for long periods in solitary confinement. So can I ask, what assurances can the Minister give that the recommendations will be implemented in the times outlined in the report? And could I ask her for an update on the possible use of body scanners within the Prison Service, and what role is the Independent Monitoring Board taking as part of this? Thank you.
Well, I thank the member for her question, and I also thank her for raising this in the chamber at the time, because it gave us the opportunity to commission this report and to receive the report, which, as she rightly says, is not comfortable reading, but is nevertheless incredibly important reading for all of those engaged within our prisons. In terms of the report, my confidence was based solely on the 3 previous reports of the Criminal Justice Inspectorate. I read those reports, and none of them raised any red flags about the operations of CSU. Indeed, in some cases, they praised the operations of CSU. And therefore, I was confident that what was happening within prisons was in order. As I have said, this inspection took place during COVID, but we do not use that as an excuse, Mr Speaker, because whatever challenges we face during COVID, we need to make sure that minimum standards do not fall. And so it is important that we implement this. I think I can take assurance that, first of all, those items which were listed to be done within 6 months, but which we felt were more urgent, were implemented not on receipt of the final report, but actually immediately on receipt of the draft report. So those have already happened. We've also seen progress with respect to implementing the remainder of the report that has taken place. So, for example, the new female CSU will be in operation at the end of next month. I think all of that indicates that the Prison Service are taking the report seriously and are acting to try and drive it forward. I recently met with the IMB. I think, as I said earlier in response to another question from my colleague Andrew Muir, it is incredibly important that IMB continue to play an active role in terms of feeding back to me and indeed to the Director-General any concerns that they have about how people are being held within prison and the standards that are there. With respect to full body searching, It is in place in most jurisdictions in order to prevent illicit and unauthorised articles being smuggled into prison. We recognise the sensitivities associated with that, and so it is conducted with sensitivity, and with the cooperation of prisoners can be completed in a few minutes. We have a proportionate approach to full searching based on focused intelligence and risk. However, as the member will know, I would be keen to see increased use of body scanners to detect traffickers. And we have submitted an application to the Justification Application Centre in the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy under the Justification of Practices Involving Ionising Radiation Regulations 2004. The purpose is to secure the necessary statutory approval to procure, install, deploy and operate X-ray body scanners within NIPS establishments to ensure and enhance existing search arrangements for prison. It will not lead to a complete ending of full body searching, but we do believe that it will make a significant difference in identifying with confidence individuals who are attempting to traffic drugs into prisoners. If a scan shows that a prisoner is not concealing drugs, obviously that reduces the need for them to be segregated.
Thank the Minister, and thank all the members. That concludes questions on the ministerial statement. Members, please take your ease for a moment as we move into the next item on the order paper. Thank you.
Order members, the Speaker has received notice from the Minister of Agriculture, Environment and Rural Affairs that he wishes to make a statement. Minister.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker, for this opportunity to make a statement to the Assembly on the support scheme for Northern Ireland Search and Rescue Services. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the fantastic work that community search and rescue services provide to the people of Northern Ireland, alongside their statutory partners in the Fire and Ambulance Service, PSNI and Coast Guard. These are community organisations that rely wholly on the commitment and dedication of selfless volunteers, who often risk their own lives for the protection of others. I recently had occasion to visit Lough Neagh Rescue and Foylan Search and Rescue, where I was struck by the incredible dedication and professionalism of these volunteers. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank all those who volunteer in our search and rescue services, who work tirelessly to provide assistance to those who get into difficulty when accessing our outstanding green and blue spaces. To say that their work is challenging and diverse is an understatement. It can range from helping someone who is taken ill or sustained an injury while out walking, to helping someone experience difficulties in the water or recovering the body of a loved one. These are vital services which contribute to creating a safe and attractive rural environment, supporting and encouraging rural development, and it is imperative that they continue to meet the needs of the people of Northern Ireland. Throughout the pandemic, we have witnessed an unprecedented rise in the number of visitors in our rural areas, and I fully expect that as my department continues to invest in rural tourism, these numbers will continue on an upward trajectory. Going to work together to grow rural tourism, then it's absolutely vital that we take the steps to ensure that people feel safe when they access all that Northern Ireland has to offer. We also need to be mindful that growth in this sector needs to be complemented by growth in the services which support it, in this case search and rescue services. It is our expectation that rural tourism will continue to grow with its numbers of people visiting our countryside and potentially increasing the number of incidents and call-outs that these organisations have to deal with. It would therefore be highly irresponsible for us to acknowledge this but not provide any form of support. So, in considering the challenges faced by Northern Ireland Search and Rescue Services, their importance to rural tourism and the safety of people who live in and visit our countryside, I have directed my officials to develop a support scheme which will provide £1.9 million in capital funding to help address not only the immediate challenges of COVID, but build resilience for the longer term. I'm delighted to be able to provide this necessary support to community search and rescue services to ensure that our rural open spaces and waterways are safe and attractive to the increasing number of visitors we have to our countryside. The range of activities that search and rescue services may be involved with is wide-ranging from firefighting to mountain rescue, flooding incidents, to name a few. And as I mentioned earlier, helping those who have experienced difficulties, often timing, and the availability of specialist equipment is critical in achieving a successful outcome. Last year I was in the front line of the gorse fires in the Mournes, where I observed Skywatch guide the fire service to tackle hotspots in the fire using high-tech drones. And funding for this support scheme, which has been approved by the Department of Finance, will help to offset the decrease in donations and support some much-needed investment to allow these organisations to upgrade and replace essential equipment. This capital funding scheme will support the procurement of replacement capital items, including vehicles, PPE, specialist and other equipment essential to the continued provision of vital services. This investment will help to ensure that volunteer responders are fully and well equipped to provide their services as effectively and efficiently, and most importantly, as safely as possible. Mr Deputy Speaker, the purpose of this statement is to outline the support scheme that my department is delivering in support of Northern Ireland Search and Rescue Services. This funding will help those organisations recover from the economic impact of the pandemic and provide a strong platform for future resilience in delivering services in a post-COVID world. It is my view that the services provided by these organisations are absolutely vital to support sustainable rural tourism and rural communities, and I sincerely hope that this funding goes some way to help ensure that the safety of those who put their lives on the line to protect ours. Thank you.
I now call Declan McAleer, the Chairperson of the Agriculture, Environment and Rural Affairs Committee.
I thank the Minister for his statement, and I very much welcome his announcement here as well. And I can say that just at the height of the pandemic in my own locality down in the Mournes area outside Omagh, I've seen at first hand the vital work that these services carry out in terms of protecting rural people whenever, in this case, was a gorse fire happened. So, Minister, can you provide a little more information as to which particular areas of the north that will benefit from this capital spending? For example, the Mournes or any other parts of the north that may benefit from this very worthwhile capital investment.
The organisations cover a wide area of Northern Ireland, so Community Rescue Service, Foyle Search and Rescue, Irish Cave Rescue Organisation, Lagan Search and Rescue, Loch Ness Rescue, Mourne Mountain Rescue, North West Mountain Rescue, Royal National Lifeboat Institution, Search and Rescue Dogs Association Northern Ireland, and Skywatch. So one can see from this is going to be a significant boost to all of these organisations and their ability, and they do cover most of rural Northern Ireland and indeed our seas.
I call William Irwin.
Deputy Speaker, and I can thank the Minister for his statement. The Minister named a number of organisations. Are these organisations named the organisations that have received funding from the fund?
Yes, so different organisations have applied to meet their particular needs. As we know, all of the people within the organisations are volunteers, so none of this is being spent on administration, none of it is being spent on providing jobs. This is all to buy capital equipment to ensure that they can continue to do their job safely. So whenever I was out in Loch Ness, seeing rescue and indeed Foyle, you can see the costs that are involved, because a lot of the equipment is very high-tech, and it is absolutely needed. And if we're have people who are in those distress situations, and indeed in the recovery of bodies, which is very important to families. It's essential that these organisations have the appropriate equipment to do the job, and this will help ensure that that's the case.
I call Mark Durgan.
And I thank the Minister for this extremely positive statement, and particularly delighted to hear that Foyle Search and Rescue are eligible for this support, given that they are based in an urban setting in Derry City. However, their work along and around the Foyle encompasses rural areas also. They're a fantastic organisation. Is the Minister in a position to confirm how much funding each organisation will receive and what that might be spent on, particularly in regard to Foyle Search and Rescue?
In the case of Foyle, it is over £150,000 Foyle Search and Rescue. I think it's possibly £159,000, but it's over £150,000, and there is particular equipment that they need to acquire, and that will go a long way to helping Foyle Search and Rescue. The member mentioned the organisation and the importance of it. Basically, that search and rescue service is out every day of the year on average, and it is quite remarkable the work that they do. And he quite rightly points out that they just don't provide a service for the urban part of the city, but they also are searching further up and downstream from the city, and therefore I managed to squeeze rural into it.
I call Rosemary Barton.
Thank you, Minister, for your statement. Minister, as you know, I live in a very beautiful part of the world. And indeed, we're very grateful to the volunteers in the water search and rescue services and the land search and rescue services, also particularly in relation to our waterways and our mountains, our walkways such as Quilca Mountain, etc., for rescues. Indeed, one only last week. Minister, you spoke about future resilience. Can you give me some guidance on how you hope to sustain this future resilience by perhaps encouraging new recruitment to these volunteer services?
Well, again, on visiting organisations, it's amazing just how many people are stepping up to the plate and want to do something to help others, and that's tremendous, and it's something I want to encourage. I would expect that if we sent them out with second-rate equipment, which was putting their own lives in jeopardy, that's not going to encourage people to come in and volunteer. So actually having the best quality of equipment so that they know that they have the capacity to do the job that they need to do, that they can do it in a safe manner, is something which will help encourage others to come in. And I know a lot of people find a real enjoyment from going out there and doing the job, and they get a real value for doing that job. And it's absolutely amazing just how many people in Northern Ireland we have in the voluntary sector, not just in search and rescue, but right across there. And you know, this House, this Assembly, the executive that we represent, need to ensure that we do acknowledge the work that they do, and say a big thank you to volunteers for all that they do to help keep our community a better place.
I call John Blair.
Deputy Speaker, and can I add to the thanks to the Minister for the statement and to DAERA for the commitment to the capital funding, which will help rescue services across Northern Ireland, including, I imagine, Loughney Rescue at Antrim in my own constituency. Can I ask in relation to that what actions can or will be taken on an interagency basis if necessary to ensure consistency in provision and in service across Northern Ireland, so we can in turn ensure consistency in safety improvements at forests and on lakes and in rivers across the jurisdiction as well?
It's a very good question, and I'm not sure who would actually be the lead on it, whether it's Justice or communities or ourselves. I honestly don't know, for it's not something that I have given considerable thought to. But I do think that the member has raised a valid point, and it is worth further thought as to how we can ensure that the groups are more coordinated, and if needs be, how they can call down support from others and so forth. So, you know, it may be a conversation, and if a member wishes to put a question into a number of ministers on it, that we would actually seek to respond to, because supporting them in such a way as to help improve connectivity, I could see is a very positive thing.
I call Philip McGuigan.
Last can call you, and can I also put on record my thanks and praise for the work of those involved in community search and rescue, and have taken part in a few fundraising events locally. So I welcome this funding and know that it will go to good use. So I thank the Minister for a statement. In the context, Minister, of the challenges of COVID-19 and ensuring that rural tourism is a sustainable priority intervention, as you've mentioned in your statement, can I ask what your department is doing to ensure that there's a focus on all-island domestic tourism market and the cross-border partnership that is required to benefit from that?
Well, in terms of the issue at hand today, in terms of all-island, we have arrangements whereby if either side of the border have a problem, and a big problem, that mutual aid is available, and that has been evidenced previously, where, for example, the helicopter has come up to us to help. We have sent people into the Irish Republic to help. So, cooperating with neighbours at a time of need is something that comes naturally to all of us, including the department that I represent.
I call Harry Harvey.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker, and thank you, Minister, for your statement. We have also seen with COVID people wanting to explore and engage more with nature and our landscapes. Like, for example, they're hill walking, open sea fishing, just to name but a few. Would you agree, Minister, that this support will enable these organisations to better protect our citizens? Thank you.
Well, certainly over COVID we did see a huge increase in people out and about in the countryside, and almost too successful on occasions, and some of our beauty spots were absolutely packed. That has eased off somewhat, but the uplift that has happened is still there. There's still more people than there was previously, and I believe that now that people have got out and realised just the beauty that's on their doorsteps, because we live in a very beautiful place, we're privileged that way, but the beauty that is on our doorsteps is something that they want to enjoy. The fresh air is something that they want to enjoy, and therefore people will go hill walking, and they will fall on occasions and break limbs and so forth, and then they need these rescue services to step in. So it's critically important that we'll have these kinds of support services, whether it be in the sea, whether it be in the hills elsewhere, caves for that matter. Wouldn't be my thing going down a cave, but if that's what people want to do, we want to ensure that if they do encounter problems, that we'll have the capacity to help get them out of that situation.
I call Cathal Boylan.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker, and could I welcome the Minister's statement. Minister, just following on, I see there in paragraph 13 you mentioned about the challenges that our search and rescue services are facing. Could you elaborate a wee bit on what those challenges are and what you found out in your visits across the market?
Well, obviously during COVID, the ability to go out and do the normal fundraising and having the social events and the dinner parties and even fundraising on the streets, all of those things were challenged. And as a result, most of the charitable organisations find themselves in a more difficult position. So, in this respect, I was brought to Loughnane in the first instance, and then Mr Middleton invited me to the Foyle Search and Rescue. And I was quite struck by the issues that they had at hand, the problems that they had at hand, and their inability maybe to deal with some of those problems. So finding a means of resourcing them, and it was tricky enough, but finding a means of resourcing them was something that I was fully committed to after seeing the need that exists out there. And you know what, if this saves one life, the 1.9 million will be money well spent. My expectation is that it will save many lives, and therefore it'll be one of the better things that I do in my period of office.
I call Tom Buchanan.
Mr Deputy Speaker. Minister, I'm sure we'll all agree today in the House that these organisations do an invaluable work in very, very difficult circumstances and have some real challenges they have to meet. Can you give us some indication as to what engagement you have had with the search and research organisations, and again to see the work that they do and the challenges that they do face?
Well, I've been out on the boats with them, and both in Loughney and then I was down in Foyle. I was up in Mourns during the fires, and witnessed the work that people do there. Absolutely beautiful location, and splendid location, and we saw the destruction that was happening at that time. And there were so many people who were volunteers, who were stepping in to help ensure that there was less harm come to the mountains at that point, and that animals in the mountain and so forth were kept safe. So there is just a wonderful reservoir of human beings here in Northern Ireland who are prepared to go out there and give up their time for nothing to help others. And I just think that is something that we need to encourage people on, and therefore providing appropriate funding to ensure they have the appropriate equipment to do that strikes me as a bit of a no-brainer.
I call Colin McGrath.
Deputy Speaker, and I thank the Minister for the announcement today. This money will be very welcome on the ground amongst a whole range of organisations, many of whom are within my constituency, given that we have the Mourne Mountains and the Mourne Rescue Service, the Lifeboat and other groups that help and encourage people to come into our area and feel safe using those resources. And whilst the pandemic has caused a problem for groups to be able to attract money as they normally would, it has also encouraged many more people to go into the outdoors, which is going to continue into the future. I suppose what I maybe would ask the Minister, is there any intention for some sustained funding going into the future? Because all of these groups will have more work to do as a result of the pandemic, and they will need more money to be able to operate safely.
Well, I suppose the thing about it is that these groups actually provide excellent value for money, because there's so many volunteers, there's such a small amount spent on actually people who are in their employment, and therefore the value for money is excellent. So, we get the full benefit here by providing the capital equipment that there's not going to be a load of it lost in administration. This is going to put material on the ground to help people do their work. And the member rightly points out, his own constituency and the work that goes on there. Be it in the lifeboat down in Newcastle Harbour, there are the men and women who are up the mountains, bringing people down who have injuries, and actually going out in some fairly appalling weather, because the Mournes, when you're up on a good day, they're spectacular. When you're up on a bad day, they can be spectacularly harsh, and those people don't have a choice. Which day they go up, they can't go up and say, well, I'll go and rescue someone in a nice sunny June day. It could be a November day, and the rain is coming sideways at you, and you've got no protection. So, ongoing, I think it is for departments to look at how they can do this and how they can ensure that Northern Ireland people who are going out to enjoy the countryside, to enjoy the seas, the lochs, the rivers, will have that support if they do get themselves into trouble. And I'd hope that they would actually listen to the rescue services even before they go out on occasions, who also just don't go and rescue people, to give qualitative advice on how people can avoid getting themselves into bad situations.
I call Linda Dillon.
And thank the Minister for this announcement. It certainly is a welcome news, I'm sure, for Loughney Rescue, and as somebody who's lucky enough to live on the edge of Loughney, I understand the beauty of it, but I also understand the danger of it. We also have an issue in the Blackwater where there is a volunteering group that do rescues at the top end, and they work with the PSNA and they do cross-border work, and they don't get funding from any source. And I'm just wondering, the Sub-Aqua Centre in Dungannon, I'm wondering, can the Minister advise if there are anywhere for them to access funding? Because you're right, these are entirely
run by volunteers, and they actually fund themselves and have to provide all their own equipment. And you're 100% right. These volunteers go out and they risk their own lives, sometimes only to bring back somebody who's already dead. But to the family who are waiting on that person, that is equally as important as bringing back somebody who has been saved. So if there are any avenues open to those organisations, I would like to hear about them. Thank you.
Well, I thank the member for drawing to the House's attention the work of the Sub-ACO group there in Blackwater Town. And like all other groups, I have absolutely no doubt that they'll be doing fantastic work. And, you know, I think going forward, I saw the need. I recognised that there was available funding this year, that there's potential for funding to be handed back to Westminster. And I pressed very hard to ensure this funding come over the line this year. I would think it would be good if a similar thing could happen next year, and perhaps some other organisations could be drawn into the net to assist them as well.
I call Morris Bradley.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker, and I'd like to thank the Minister for this very welcome announcement that he has made to the House today. Search and rescue is something, Minister, I hold very dear in my constituency. Along with the RANLI, they do a valuable service in the River Bann, the North Coast and the North Coastline. So I'm well aware of the work they do, both organisations and others. So, Minister, would you agree with me that this funding will help reduce some of the pressure on these organisations? As has already been alluded to, many are run by dedicated volunteers with no primary aim but to ultimately save lives. And this funding will provide fantastic equipment that could be used to save lives, like thermal imaging cameras, etc.
Absolutely, and I think it's critically important that whenever the bottom line is going down for them because the fundraising has slowed down, that they do get that help, and they are capable then of continuing to provide the service that they've been providing. Because we don't want the groups to be in a situation where the call-outs are coming in and they feel that they're not capable of providing the service that is needed because of the equipment that they currently have, and therefore ensuring that they have the right and appropriate equipment will immensely increase their sustainability.
I call Keith Buchanan.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. First of all, I'd like to thank the Minister for his statement and his responses so far, Minister. And there's a bizarre issue going on where the Blackwater meets Lough Neagh, and Lough Neagh Rescue do an amazing job, but a boat, as you well know, needs water to operate. The difficulty is with the Blackwater meets Lough Neagh, there's only 450 millimetres of water, so therefore Lough Neagh Rescue can't get up the Blackwater. And I've been working with DFI. What pressure can your department put on DFI to solve this problem, where basically, whether it be pleasure crafts, but more importantly rescue boats, which you're supporting, can get from Lough Neagh up the Blackwater? Anybody in difficulty or in trouble, they can't get to them. Never mind the number of vehicles, or not vehicles, should I say, boats every year run aground, and therefore they're going out time after time to solve a problem that shouldn't be there.
Translating that back into old language is a foot and a half, I think. But anyway, it's a fairly marginal amount of water, and I can understand the issue, therefore, that the member is talking about. And the last thing you'd want is one of these vessels to run aground in waters like that there. So certainly that is an issue. I was aware of issues around Lough Neagh as well, in terms of managing its height and so forth, and then the flooding that can happen as a consequence. And I know some people are against dredging, for example, but that certainly is a conversation well worth having with DFI. And if I can support the member from the Ministry of Agriculture in taking that case, I'm very happy to do it.
I call Robbie Butler.
Mr Deputy Speaker, thank the Minister for his announcement. Anyone that is involved in rescue services is right at the top of my totem pole in terms of respect. Having worked in a Pedro with regard to search and rescue with the fire service, I'm very aware that some of the pressures that are on our voluntary groups isn't just resource in terms of equipment, but one of those pressures on them is training and interoperability. I had the privilege of training with the Loughney Rescue when I worked with the Fire and Rescue Service. Will this money then extend to paying those volunteers perhaps for training days, as well as identifying other opportunities for that interoperability, which is so important to successful outcomes?
As I understand, not at this point now, I know the member has an excellent knowledge of this, having been in the fire service for many years, and therefore, mixing with these groups whenever you go to circumstances and situations. Training is obviously key in every organisation to ensuring that the skill base is good. Again, this is something that could be looked at in the future. For this moment in time, this is about providing the equipment, but let's ensure that whatever department it is, and it's not necessarily this department, but whatever department it is going forward, our departments will continue to support these voluntary groups.
And that concludes questions to the Minister on his statement. I would ask members to take their ease for a few moments. Order, members. The next item of business is the further consideration stage of the non-domestic rates valuations coronavirus bill. And I call the Minister of Finance, Conor Murphy, to move the bill.
I beg to move that the further consideration stage of the non-domestic rates valuations coronavirus bill be agreed.
As no amendments have been tabled, there is no opportunity to discuss the non-domestic rates valuation coronavirus bill today. Members will, of course, be able to have a full debate at the final stage. The further consideration stage of the non-domestic rates valuations coronavirus bill is therefore concluded, and the bill stands referred to the Speaker. The next item on the order paper is a motion to suspend Standing Order 42.1. Clerk, please read the motion.
Standing Order 42.1 be suspended for 7th February 2022 in respect of the final stage of the non-domestic rates valuation coronavirus bill.
And I call the Minister of Finance to move the motion.
To move.
Thank you. The Business Committee has agreed that there should be no time limit in this debate, so I therefore call on the Minister of Finance to open the debate on the motion.
Standing Order 42.1 provides there should be a minimum of 5 working days between each stage of any bill, and I fully recognise that providing that time between stages serves to ensure detailed legislative scrutiny by the Assembly by providing members with the opportunity to consider the legislation that has been proposed in detail. As this bill has been progressed in line with the requirement to provide certainty on the tax base for district councils setting rates, and given that the Finance Committee have faithfully worked on an expedited basis before, during and after Christmas in order to facilitate the bill completing its passage for councils striking the rates, I am moving the motion to suspend Standing Order 42.1 in an effort to ensure that the final stage can take place in advance of the date by which councils will be setting their rates, which is the 15th of February. To not move the motion would mean that the debate for the final stage would not take place until the 14th of February at the earliest, which is just one day ahead of the final date for council rate setting. The committee have worked in a committed and dedicated fashion over recent weeks to allow the bill to be considered on an expedited basis. And while obviously I will be reflecting on the sterling work of the committee during the final stage debate, I should also take this opportunity to briefly commend the committee chair and deputy chair, the committee members and the committee staff for their work following the decision of the Assembly not to proceed on the basis of accelerated passage for the bill. That said, as there were no bill amendments tabled for either consideration stage last Monday or further consideration stage today, I feel it would be prudent at this point to make the case for suspending Standing Order 42.1 so as to bring the final stage forward slightly, thus allowing for a greater period of notice for those councils that wish to see the outcome of the bill following the Assembly's final vote at final stage. Last Concordia, it's for that sole reason that I move the motion. I do so on the basis of consolidating and complementing the work of the Executive and the Committee in helping me bring the bill to this point on an expedited basis to date, and I trust that I will get the support of the Chamber on that basis.
I call Steve Aiken, Chair of the Finance Committee.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. I would like to thank the Minister for his opening remarks. My comments are made on behalf of the Committee for Finance. I intend to make further remarks on behalf of the Committee at final stage, where I hope I will be able to comment more generally on the non-domestic rates valuation coronavirus bill. For now, I will address the motion. Mr Deputy Speaker, the Assembly previously denied accelerated passage for this bill. However, members of the Finance Committee indicated in plenary that we would facilitate its expedited passage. To that end, the Committee took evidence quickly in December and reported promptly on the Committee stage in early January. We learned during our abbreviated considerations that there had been a number of related valuation appeals. The Department indicated that these had been stayed. The Department also advised that even if they had been progressed, the time period for resolution would necessarily be quite prolonged. It seemed clear that those hard-pressed businesses would not secure relief from this source on any useful timescale. It is therefore understood that it would be far better for the Executive to provide targeted and well-thought-out COVID relief measures to address these important COVID business problems. The Committee has not taken a formal view on the suspension of this standing order. However, given the foregoing, I think we might conclude that there is little point to delaying the progress of the bill. It is regrettable, however, that the Department failed to warn the Committee that it was to follow this particular course of action, and thus, indeed, save the Minister from yet another debate. Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker.
I call Minister McHugh.
Gurmagart las con Carla agus ardus just by lumsa buhas the annulation ira fosta and at the outset I'd just like to thank the Minister as well for his statement. And I'll keep my remarks brief as we'll be returning to this issue at the final stage within a short period of time. There's no doubt that this bill is needed to deal with the consequences of the pandemic on the rating system. The legal advice is clear. Restrictions on businesses which have been in place since March 2020, designed to mitigate the spread of COVID-19, would constitute grounds for appeal of NAVSs under Section 39A of the Rates Order. Now, since nearly all businesses would have been subject to some restrictions since the onset of the pandemic, most businesses would be within their rights to appeal their NAV, which came into force on April 1, 2020. Now, this could have serious consequences for the tax base, as it is predicted that up to 250 million of rates revenue will be lost to the Executive and the Council's local over a 3-year period. Now, I have sympathy with many businesses in our community who have faced huge difficulties as a result of the pandemic and who feel that rates they are being asked to pay doesn't adequately reflect the struggles that they are experiencing. However, I believe we must seek to provide the appropriate support without risking our public finances. The Executive has provided much financial support to struggling businesses and is continuing to support those who haven't recovered from the pandemic. Businesses have benefited from a freeze in the regional rate, generous rates holidays and support schemes which have been available from March 2020 and most recently with the Omicron hospitality payment. The draft budget also contains a rates relief package worth 50 million, which will provide a 1-month rates holiday to all sectors and a 3-month holiday to the hardest hit sectors. In addition, the Department of Finance has ordered a new revaluation exercise which will take into account the economic consequences of the pandemic in the next NAV list due in 2023. Councils are particularly anxious about the current threat to the tax base, and many of us as ex-councillors will totally understand that fear that would exist within councils at present. They rely heavily on the revenue collected via the district rates. Councils need certainty in the coming weeks as they prepare to set their business rates for the upcoming financial year. And given the short time frame we are facing with the end of the mandate approaching and the heavy legislative workload of the Assembly, any move to hasten the passage of this bill is welcome, and I look forward to it returning to the Assembly within a short period of time for its final stage.
I now call on the Minister for Finance, Conor Murphy, to conclude and wind up the debate on the motion.
I'll be very brief. I thank both the committee chair and the member, Mr McHugh, for their contributions. As I said at the outset in my opening remarks, this is not about trying to curtail or reduce a level of scrutiny for a piece of legislation, but simply, given the process that has been gone through to date, given the fact that there will be no amendments or nothing in further consideration stage to deal with, and that the councils are in the process of striking their own rate, and that the information as a consequence of the passing of this legislation is hugely important to them in that exercise, that we are just trying to expedite the end point of this and get to a point where we can advise the councils in good time. So I thank the members for their contribution. I thank the committee again for its work in relation to this, and I urge members to support the motion.
Before I put the question, I would remind members that this motion requires cross-community support. The question is that the motion standing on the order paper is agreed. All those in favour say aye. Contrary, no. As there are ayes from all sides of the House and there are no dissenting voices, I am satisfied that cross-community support has been demonstrated. The motion is agreed. The motion is agreed. I ask members to take their ease before the next item of business. Order members, the next item of business is the further consideration stage of the organ and tissue donation deemed consent bill, and I call the Minister of Health, Mr Rob Swan, to move the motion.
I beg to move that the further consideration stage of the organ and tissue donation deemed consent bill be agreed.
As no amendments have been tabled, there is no opportunity to discuss the organ and tissue donation deemed consent bill today. Members will, of course, be able to have a full debate at the final stage of the bill. The further consideration stage of the organ and tissue donation deemed consent bill is therefore concluded, and the bill stands referred to the Speaker. Again, I would ask members to take their ease.
Thank you, members. We now move on to consideration stage of the Climate Change No. 2 Bill. I call the Minister of Agriculture, Environment and Rural Affairs, Mr Edwin Poots, to move the bill. Minister.
I beg to move that consideration stage of Climate Change No. 2 Bill be agreed.
Thank you, members. Members will have a copy of the marshalled list of amendments detailing their order for consideration. The amendments have been grouped for debate in the provisional grouping of amendments in the selected list. There are 4 groups of amendments, and we will debate the amendments in each group in turn. First debate will be on amendments 1 to 17, 20, 29 to 32, 34, 35, 55 to 59, 64 to 66 and 75, which deal with targets, carbon budgets and nitrogen balance sheets. The second debate will be on amendments 18, 19, 21 to 28, 36 to 42, 45 to 49, 51, 76, 77, 79 and 80, which will deal with proposals and policies. The third debate will be on amendments 33, 60 to 63, 67 to 74 and 78, which deals with oversight, governance and accountability. The fourth debate will be on amendments 43, 44, 50 and 52 to 54, which deals with the just transition principles and fund. I would remind members who are intending to speak that during the debates on the 4 group of amendments, they should address all of the amendments, in each group on which they wish to comment. Once the debate on each group is completed, any further amendments in the group will be moved formally as we go through the bill, and the question on each will be put without further debate. The questions on stand part will be taken at the appropriate points in the bill. Clear as mud. We now come to the first group of amendments for debate. The member here to move. We now come to the first group of amendments for debate. With Amendment 1, it will be convenient to debate Amendments 2 to 17, 20, 29 to 32, 34, 35, 55 to 59, 64 to 66 and 75. Within this group, Amendment 3 is mutually exclusive to Amendment 2. Amendment 5 is mutually exclusive to Amendment 4. Amendment 10 is mutually exclusive to Amendment 9. Amendment 12 is consequential to Amendment 4 or 5. Amendment 13 is consequential to Amendment 12. And Amendments 14, 17, 55 and 75 are consequential to Amendment 4 or 5. Amendment 29 is a paving amendment to a number of other amendments. At this order, I was to call Ms. Bailey to move this. She's not here. I now move on then. Ms. Bailey's not in her place. And I move on then to call Mr. Philip McGuigan to move Amendment number 6. Mr. McGuigan. Moved. Mr. Allister.
Why would Amendment 4 not be called before 6?
Mr. Allister's right. Amendment 4 should be called before Amendment 6. So who's moving that? Minister.
Moved.
We now commence the debate on Amendment 4. Minister.
Thank you. If you can give me a moment, Mr. Speaker, just to get to the appropriate point. First of all, I'd like to thank the Chair and members of the ERA Committee for their scrutiny of the bill. That has been hugely beneficial over the course of the last number of weeks, and I'm pleased that we are now at a stage where this bill, a science-based bill, is ready to move forward, and that, I believe, is something which is hugely positive. In terms of the bill that is being brought forward, I believe that this is the right bill for this House. It is a bill which will ensure that we can tackle the important issues around climate on the one hand, and ensure on the other hand that we can deal with all of the issues that involve our economy, our agri-food sector, and all of that. So I'll begin by outlining the amendments that are being brought forward today, and all of the amendments were brought forward by me after in-depth discussions and agreements with the ERA Committee during consideration stage of my bill. The various amendments 61, 62, 63 and 67 I've brought forward are to strengthen my bill in relation to oversight, governance and accountability, including but not limited to amendments to clause 21 of the bill. I fully recognise...
Can I ask the Minister briefly to resume his seat? I think it's important, given the sheer scale of what we're about to go through, that we get this procedurally correct. I have been advised by the Clerk that although Ms Bailey wasn't in her place to move Amendment 1, any member would have had the right so to do. So I'm making the House aware of that before the Minister proceeds on this. Amendment 1, is anyone indicating to me that they wish to move it? Minister. Point of order, yeah.
Why in that case then would any member not be able to move amendment number 2?
We've always moved to the first amendment in the group, and I know that Ms Bailey wasn't in post, and I've now offered the House the opportunity to move the amendment. Now, I'm sorry, there have been 2 opportunities now. I need to take advice from the clerks on this because it's a very serious issue. If members could just take their ease for a few moments. Thank you, members. I've been advised, as opportunity was given for the member and for the House, or for other members gathered here in the House to move Amendment 1, it won't be called. And we'll move on now to Amendment number 2. And I call Ms Claire Bailey to formally move Amendment number 2.
Moved.
Amendment proposed, Clause 1, page 1, line 6, leave out and insert the words as printed on the marshalled list. And we start the debate on that.
I just take the opportunity to apologise to the House. I wasn't in my seat and I wasn't here on time, and I am very sorry the business has moved much quicker today than was scheduled. So I can only apologise and thank you for allowing me to speak. But Speaker, if it's okay, I'm going to speak to the group as a whole. And in the amendments in Group 1, these really relate to the targets and the interim target years. And a strong and certain target will be absolutely key to providing and underpinning the emissions reductions that will follow in this Act. So the Green Party's amendments propose that the deadline year for the emissions target to be 2045, and almost every party present in this...
It's going to be one of those afternoons. Mr Allister.
Yes, the mover has just said that she is moving that the start year should be 2045. Haven't you just ruled that the amendment which would make it 2045, namely Amendment 1, has not and cannot be moved?
The member's correct. That is correct. I understand that I beg your pardon. I understand Ms Bailey said in her introductory remarks that she was speaking to the group, but the point that the member has made is accurate in terms of the start date of 2045. Ms Bailey.
Thank you, Speaker. I was referencing the 2045 because it's in the context of what the Green Party are proposing. So, of course, we're not moving Amendment 1, but the other amendments that we have proposed within this bill are all linked together. So it's a general debate rather than speaking to the amendment, and I hope that the member will allow me to do that, because almost every party present in this chamber did sign up to that commitment in Climate Change Bill number 1. And since that bill was published, we've had COP26 in Glasgow, underscoring how urgent we have to act, and the IPCC report declaring code red for humanity. And if the parties were signed up before then, we certainly must be signed up to it now. And if that's no longer the case, then the onus on parties to explain that change is for them to do. Because we still believe that Northern Ireland needs strong and ambitious climate targets, and we can no longer afford to be the climate laggard in the UK. Every indication is that we are heading down the wrong path. Right now, we're failing to contribute to an overall UK target. A Climate Act with an 82% overall target places us as just about contributing, but still a drag on progress, relying on other UK jurisdictions to pick up the slack for us. But any change in context at a UK level will mean that we will be in a disastrous position. And if, and I believe when, the UK decides to accelerate its targets and its ambition, we won't be in the best place to adapt to this. But we should not just want net zero targets simply because we're afraid of being left behind. We should also want it because of the opportunity it will bring. Net zero for Northern Ireland is possible, and it brings certainty and investment from a global market that is getting ever more focused on climate credentials for investment. What happens to our economy when GB and the Republic move ahead with net zero targets and we're left behind? And it's very important to address the elephant in the room and the tractors at the door, agriculture, and which I'm sure will be the focus of much of the debate today. And firstly, the Green Party is pro-farmer. We want to see farmers and farming communities survive and thrive well into the future. But to do this, the agricultural industry needs to be sustainable for future generations. Net zero targets will not be the ruination of the Northern Ireland agriculture. The Minister,
I know that the member in bringing her bill didn't trouble with an economic assessment, and therefore the KPMG economic assessment was provided. It's very, very clear. Her bill, her proposal, 100%, requires an 86% cut in livestock, 13,000 jobs on farm to be lost, and several thousand thereafter in the process. And how then can she say that she is on the side of farming, that this is good for the economy, when that primary industry would be devastated by her proposal? Or is she going to tell us that KPMG don't know what they're talking about?
the member for his intervention. Of course, that's the same KPMG who were found last week to be falsifying minutes and records in order to produce a report for the fossil fuel industry. And yesterday we heard from KPMG that the figures that they gave in that report removed the public subsidies, which is up to 86% to the sector, when doing that economic assessment. They removed the public subsidy funding and did their economic assessment based on removing that, because they said that they didn't know what the future public investment in the sector would be, so therefore they negated to put any into that report. And of course the chair of the CCC himself has also removed himself from the claims of job losses put into that one, so it's a bit of a debatable report. But anyway, the net zero target will not be the ruination of Northern Ireland agriculture. And the farming media and the Minister should really have a look at how they've let the agri-food corporates dominate and frame the conversation on these bills as a farmer versus the environment debate. Because farmers are custodians of the land and they know nature better than anyone. And any farmer, of course, that you speak to will tell you exactly that. The level of misinformation and scaremongering that has taken place, fuelled by some on these benches and the agri-food lobby, is shameful. Many countries that are heavily reliant on agriculture have set net zero targets, amongst them the Netherlands and the Republic of Ireland, whose targets have not signalled the end of farming in their countries. Instead, they've paved the way for funding and support to flow into the sector.
I'm not sure if she has some information that the rest of us don't know, that the Irish Farmers Association are supporting proposals in the Republic of Ireland. They were actually supportive of the protest this morning, so the member should not purport to articulate that the farmers in the Republic of Ireland are happy with their proposals that are not science-based either, and they have not defined in the Republic of Ireland how they're going to achieve what they've set out to achieve. And I would imagine that whenever people see what is actually required, they will be horrified.
The Minister for his intervention, and of course if he listens to the words that I speak, I said many countries that are heavily reliant on agriculture have set net zeros, not that farmers in those countries are very happy with it. And of course what he refers to in terms of the bill that's been passed in the south needs the plans to go with it, and that's actually in motion at the minute. So they will set their targets, and they will set the ambition, despite being even more reliant on agriculture in the south than we are here in the north. And the Netherlands has set £21 billion worth of funding for their agriculture sector to help the sector contribute to meet the target. So with the right supports, agriculture can lead from the front with the transition. And Sir Peter Kendall last week released his independent strategic review of the Northern Ireland agri-food sector. The Minister will be very familiar with this report, as he commissioned it himself, and it makes for some startling reading. It says that the gap between perception and reality in terms of Northern Ireland's environmental credentials is stark. It reads, Northern Ireland's environmental scorecard makes for grim reading. The environment has paid the price for the success of Northern Ireland's agri-food, and the ambition to sell Northern Ireland produce on the back of its sustainability depends on plans being put in place and quickly to turn things around. The report also touches on the threats posed to Northern Ireland farming post-Brexit. I've spent the past week scrutinising how New Zealand and Australian trade deals are set to hugely displace Northern Ireland produce. It is naive of anyone to think that climate action is the threat here. Sir Peter Kendall's review is unequivocal. Northern Ireland must look beyond traditional markets for its agri-food produce, as the GB market is set to get flooded with imports from across the world as a result of these trade deals. Europe is the obvious choice as a market for Northern Ireland produce. This all points to post-Brexit trade deals, not climate mitigation, not climate ambition. And the Minister, can you answer me then, when New Zealand and Australian agri-food products start to flood the GP market, and when we start to look at Europe as a market for our produce, what happens when we can't access this market because the EU has a net zero target and we don't? What happens to your Northern Ireland agriculture sector then? Citing climate change as the existential threat to agriculture is a red herring. And I urge the farming community not to be naive on this too.
Would the member give way?
Certainly.
The UK as a whole has a net zero target. The issue about Northern Ireland is there is recognition by the Climate Change Committee and their scientific review is that Northern Ireland provides food to other parts of the UK and as such does contribute to climate change emissions. But does she not accept that to put additional burdens on local production will simply offshore our food and actually generate increased carbon outputs from other areas that are not as climate efficient as we are, and actually will be counterproductive? You will produce additional greenhouse gas emission by offshoring our food production, whether it is to Australia, New Zealand, America, or even if it's produced in other parts of the United Kingdom.
Before the lady answers that question, this is going to be a long hike, folks, so I'm sure everyone will get making their points. If we could try and keep them shorter, that would be great. Ms Bailey.
Thanks, and I thank the member for the intervention. And again, I'll go back to just what I've just said, that it is the imports from other trade deal negotiations being undertaken by Boris Johnson as post-Brexit, his utopia that he envisaged, that is the greater threat to Northern Ireland produce being able to continue to survive in GB markets. So to continue down this path with blinkers on is insanity when we don't know what's coming. We have to clean up our act so that we can differentiate ourselves in the global market based on excellent environmental and carbon credentials. Otherwise, we are sacrificing the future of farming for the sake of corporate profits now. Certainly.
Thank you to the member for giving way. And this is a really interesting point that she makes about our credentials in relation to climate change and carbon emissions. Would the member agree with me that the demand for food is going to increase exponentially in the coming years? And unfortunately, that demand for food will be met by countries who do not have the climate change credentials that we currently have in the United Kingdom, and indeed that we aspire to as a whole United Kingdom by 2050. And indeed in the EU, those Mercosur countries in South America are currently clearing whole swathes of the Amazon forest in order to increase their beef production, so that the food will have to be, our food demands will have to be met, and that the countries that she is seeking to meet them from do not have those climate credentials.
Thank the member for the intervention. And of course, food and food supplies will change as climate mitigations and climate change becomes even more apparent. What they will be still remains unknown. But we need to really question: is it Northern Ireland who were going to be feeding Brazil? If that was your example, I'm not really sure about that, and whether we would even have the capacity to do that. But we are part of the food production change. Nobody's saying that we should stop producing food, but what the food supplies will be remains unknown. So climate action is not anti-farming, and I've tabled amendments that I will discuss later today to establish a just transition fund for agriculture, just like the Netherlands, for example, just like Scotland, for example. And I've tabled amendments to ensure the plans and policies under this bill take account of the particular needs of our rural communities. I've also tabled amendments to ensure that climate action here does not just move production of emissions elsewhere through that carbon leakage that has been mentioned by some already. We ensure that this is a process that is a fair one, that gives agriculture the best possible chance of being a sustainable industry well into the future. Setting a strong target is a political decision, and we only have to look to our neighbours in Scotland to see how strong political decision-making on this leads to huge rewards. Scotland has set strong net zero by 2045 targets, despite the fact that much of its economy is propped up by fossil fuels. Since this target was set in law, we've seen so many innovative support streams from the green transition flooding into Aberdeen from the UK government and the private sector.
Thank you. You speak about Scotland having set net zero targets by 2045. You expect Northern Ireland to go the same. We cannot go the same way simply because we have a totally different topographical area. Scotland is a much larger area. It is much more wild, much more forestry, greater areas of bogland, etc. We don't have that in Northern Ireland, and I think you've got to rethink that.
Thank the member for intervention. And I'm not sure if you were here at the start, but I wasn't present to move the first amendment for the 2045 target, so I think that's off the table already. The money is flowing into Scotland because of the challenges Scotland faces with decarbonisation. So why then is there this attitude at a UK level that we in Northern Ireland buy into, that where Northern Ireland is concerned, the support won't be provided to help us reach net zero ambitions, even if we wanted to? In a UK context, a relatively small agriculture sector is much easier to support towards net zero than the extensive Scottish oil and gas industry. This is a political decision. The UK government can and should support Northern Ireland's net zero ambitions and not leave us sitting as a dirty corner of Europe. The UK Climate Change Committee has recommended that we set an at least 82% emissions reduction target for 2050. And while the CCC is rightly a highly respected advisory body, it is advisory. The CCC is not a policy-setting body. We are the legislators, and that is our job. The CCC's advice does not make the case for Northern Ireland cementing its position as a climate laggard in law. Instead, it underscores that the UK government needs to step up and recognise some of the very particular challenges faced by us and provide a greater degree of support and assistance, like that being provided to parts of Scotland. And it's obvious that we also share a single biogeographic unit with the Republic of Ireland. That no matter your position on political unions, we are a separate landmass than GB. And our water flows, our nitrogen flows, our air, our ammonia, the list goes on, does not recognise borders. So what happens when our behaviours here start impacting on those in the Republic? And we're being told that we cannot meet net zero because of the emissions from our agri-sector. And yes, agriculture does make the biggest proportion of our emissions, contributing 26% of total greenhouse gases produced. But as already mentioned, agriculture emissions make up 37% of total emissions in the Republic. Yet they have been politically brave enough to set themselves an ambitious target because they know that this is where we all need to be if we really do have any hope of surviving. Certainly.
Remember, realise that the Irish Republic have confirmed that they will reduce methane by 10% by 2030. So who's ahead and who's behind there? We're already ahead of the Republic of Ireland. And the members moving into areas like waterways and so forth. The waterways issue is an entirely different one from the climate change issue. And dealing with phosphates in an appropriate way is the way it will actually deal with our waterways, which is an entirely separate debate. So conflating the two is causing confusion and it should be best not to do it.
For his ambition, and if we really are leading the way and doing better, why stop that ambition and slow us down? Why not keep going? The European Union has introduced a 2050 net zero target. So Northern Ireland cannot just become a solitary corner of Europe left behind. Net zero is possible. The Chief Executive of the CCC, speaking on Good Morning Ulster in November, said that there is no technical barrier to Northern Ireland reaching net zero emissions, and that if net zero is the way the politicians want to go, then of course you can go further than 82%. Yep.
Thank you very much indeed for the member giving way. The member talks about the European Union's move towards net zero carbon by 2050. But the member would also be aware that within various European Union countries, indeed in France and Spain, and I also understand within Germany as well, there are different targets for different regions. Why would there be a set of different targets across, let's say, France or Spain or indeed Germany, and not have one within our great nation, the United Kingdom?
The member rightly raises that different states across Europe have their own targets. So while Europe has set net zero for 2050, we know, for example, Sweden has increased that ambition. I think they're 2045 now. We know that Finland, maybe they've taken a leaf out of the member's own manifesto. They've set net zero by 2035, in line with your policy setting as well. So different states can implement their own legislation, but the overall target for Europe remains at net zero by 2050. And it's setting that legally binding target is a worthy and appropriate target for Northern Ireland.
Just for clarification, Northern Ireland is part of the United Kingdom and is likely to remain so for a considerable period of time. So therefore, it's within the UK's target of 2050. In my understanding, indeed, from being at COP26 and also the conversations I've had with the CCC and my previous work with the IPCC, actually one of the few countries in Europe that is likely to make the 2050 target is indeed the United Kingdom. So why the differential? Why is Northern Ireland, where we're looking at an 82% approach to that, being singled out particularly that we have to have a greater target to try and achieve that goal?
Thank the member for that. And it goes back to what I've said already. We are a separate landmass. The environmental impact is very different for us than it is on the GB landmass. So we know that in Northern Ireland we are the climate laggards. We are the highest emitters across these islands. Our biodiversity and the environmental damage being done here is not the same as in GB. So while we might have a UK overall net zero target and be part of that by not reaching net zero, the environmental consequences that we feel and we will have and the impact on our landmass will be very, very different from that in GB. And that needs to be taken into account. Our biodiversity, our peatlands, our air quality, our water quality, soil qualities will all be very different because we are a separate landmass, and that needs to be taken into account. If I could just finish this. Am I only speaking to just this amendment, Speaker? Okay, thank you. I'll wrap up just this amendment then. As legislators, this is our decision, and the targets are a political choice. And what we have to make is a decision for ourselves. This goes beyond party political interest. and beyond short-term considerations. It goes beyond elections. It goes beyond the interest of corporate lobbyists. It's about securing a future for ourselves, for our children and for our grandchildren. It's about setting the framework and creating systems that will be fit for the future. So I urge this House to please decide wisely. If you want to sleep at night and look your grandchildren in the eye, be confident that you told them that you did everything possible with the privilege that you hold. Thank you.
Thank you. As it is now just past 5 to 1, I propose to suspend this sitting for a meeting of the Business Committee. When we return at 2, the next item on the agenda will be question to the Minister for Infrastructure, after which, when we resume this debate, the next speaker will be Mr Philip McGuigan. So the sitting is suspended. Thank you.
Assembly Plenary, Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary, Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary, Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary, Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary, Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary, Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary, Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary, Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary, Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary, Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary, Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary, Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary, Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary, Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary, Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary, Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary, Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary, Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary, Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary, Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary, Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary, Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary, Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary, Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary, Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary, Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary, Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary, Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary, Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary, Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary, Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary, Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary, Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary, Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary, Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary, Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary, Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary, Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary, Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary, Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary, Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary, Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Plenary. Programme signed. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly